Welcome, folks, back to another episode of the McKinney Podcast. We celebrate what makes us unique by nature. And this episode, Fred and I have the distinct privilege of talking with an elected official and a longtime McKinney resident, a business owner, a fantastically successful business owner. She and her husband have done some really cool things the last 40-something years. So, Ms. Keresa Richardson, State Representative for House District 61, thank you for joining us.
Hi, James.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, Fred.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fred, you already know her.
Yes.
I haven't ever had the privilege of talking to her outside of just a couple of conversations at chamber things. We spoke briefly at the Christmas party.
Sure.
And other than that, everything I see is on TV or online, so I could not be more interested for this conversation.
Well, good.
I just want to start off that, I've known Keresa for I don't know how many years. And it was one of those things where, because actually all of us attend the same church at Cottonwood, and I just remember someone saying, that Keresa, JR, I would hear their names all the time, and they were always involved, always supporting things, and it wasn't a out in front sort of thing, and eventually someone said that's Keresa and that's JR, and I was like, it's good to know, because around the church campus people know you. But
it's a big church.
It is a big church.
Yeah.
It's a big church.
Yeah, it sure is.
But it was always not. Well, I try to avoid saying never and always, but it seemed that whenever there was something going on, something that needed, not just dollar support, but physical hands-on support. Eventually I was like, well, there's Keresa and JR. And so, you've been leaders in the church in various aspects, and not in title, but in just servant leadership. So that's how I got to know Keresa and JR. And of course, you've hosted many events, and your home is like the best event space.
Since we don't have one in McKinney, it's the best we do.
Right?
Yes, but and most of the things that I've been to there have been small, more like family level things, Bible studies and things like that. And so even you opened your home for a wedding, and all these things.
Yeah, we do.
And so there's so many things.
When you have one of the most exquisite homes in all of McKinney, there's so much you can do with it. I didn't even know that was your house. I've just admired it from across the water from Adriatica. And one time Fred pointed out, he's like, who lives there? I was like, no. He's like, well, that's Keresa Richardson's house. I was like, no kidding. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful
It's not our house, it's God's house. We tell people we just do the maintenance.
There you go.
So,
Love that.
we try and use it for the Lord and do a lot of charity events there. And like you said, we've been blessed to share it with everybody. Mm-hmm. We've been at Cottonwood for over 25 years. So when we started at Cottonwood, there were less than 300 people there, and y'all know how large it is now. So, so definitely seen a lot of changes there. And of course, JR is one of the Bible teachers there. Yep. So we're very involved and love it. It's home. So,
So typically we have an elected official or someone who's got a staff, and we'll have some sort of rally call. We'll lay out questions ahead of time and talk about what to expect for the official. In this case, we haven't done any prep at all. You're coming in a little blind. So just so you understand kind of what to expect here in this conversation, we're going to start with the early years. You can fill us in on how you came to be an adult and early years in marriage and business and anything you want to share along those lines. We'll pretty quickly get into building a business and your life as an entrepreneur and whatnot, and everything kind of leading up to when you chose to get involved in politics, because I found it interesting as I was doing my research here. Prior to 2024, I can't find anything on you other than your activities as a private citizen, your own philanthropic or political donations, whatever. I didn't look at election filings or anything. I didn't go that deep. Well, I spent a few minutes trying to figure out, okay, what's this lady done before she ran for office in 2024? No trade association boards, no nonprofit boards, no city boards or commissions. You've just been a mom, a grandma, a business leader, active in your church, obviously. There's a lot the public may not be aware of for you, and we just want to talk about that. The second half of the episode will get specific with policy positions. Obviously, you've been an elected official for a term now. You've had a full term in Austin, and there's some things that people just want to hear your take on. Sure. People have really strong opinions, as you can imagine, all across the spectrum, positively and negatively. So the point of stuff like episodes like this is just, hey, let's ask direct questions and let the candidates speak for themselves in whatever candid way they want to.
Sure.
So that's really our whole episode.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am.
Always good.
Okay, so we're going to start from ground zero. When your feet first touched the earth, where was that soil?
I was born in Denison,
Okay.
north of here. So
Right.
my family settled Grayson County. My husband's family settled Collin County. And our grandchildren are 11th generation Texans.
Wow.
So we've been here a very, very long time. Texas is home. I say we're Texans before we're Americans. I mean, we have family that fought in the Texas Revolution. So two Spanish land grants before Texas was a country. So so very proud Texans, and Texas is home. So very, very proud mom of 3 kids, grandmother of 5, and Christmas Day we found out we're going to be great grandparents.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be a fun chapter. But so we've been here, all our lives, and so Texas.
So you're born in Denison.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find your way to McKinney? Or was it for JR and something with him, or was there another reason to come down here?
Well, I was in grad school. I have a bachelor's and 2 master's degrees, but I was in grad school in Oklahoma when JR and I met, and he was living in Mesquite. And this was kind of halfway in between. So when
It was convenient.
It was convenient when you're driving back and forth to Oklahoma to finish grad school, and so we chose this area to settle in
Because nobody wants to build a family and life in Mesquite. McKinney is such a better choice.
Well, this was like 40 years ago, 2 years ago or whatever, so a long time ago.
Okay, so settle the debate. Pokes or Sooners?
Oh, that's no debate. She's got a strong opinion.
Well, yeah, I'm a Poke. Sorry.
But you're wearing the other school's colors.
Well, I'm an Aggie. I got my bachelor's at A&M, so I'm an Aggie. So my loyalty is to A&M.
Okay.
But grad school was at OSU.
Okay.
So there you
You
go.
tried the wrong gotcha question.
Yeah,
What
no,
are you doing?
I
Come on now.
just want to make sure because someone out there is going to ask, because they need to know. So, it's for the people.
Okay. So how do you go from grad school to what you ended up doing for the majority of your career? You and JR running what started off as a small family business, then turned into a plumbing empire and everything else you guys are doing.
I wouldn't call it an empire.
It's one generation, though. What you guys have done in one generation is just so impressive, honestly. Speaking as a business owner, in one generation of leadership, my word.
Lots of hard work.
We should all be so fortunate and blessed.
Lots of hard work. JR is a plumber. And so when we started out, I did the books and he was out in the field and we grew the business. And of course, we had 3 children. And at some point in time, the office was at home and I was homeschooling our daughter. We had our two oldest boys went to public school and I homeschooled our daughter. And so, over the years, things morph as life does and things change. But we were just very blessed. We worked very hard. And then and grew the business, and then we added HVAC and electrical and pest control and other verticals to it. We expanded to San Antonio and Austin and Houston, and so just grew the businesses. We helped to start a national franchise, the Ben Franklin Plumbing franchise, about 25 years ago, and we opened the first 30 locations, wrote the policy and procedure manuals, created the franchise. And then I served as the national president for 5 years. So did that. And then, we were always politically active. I mean, I've always been politically active, but behind the scenes, just trying to help good people get into office, doing fundraising for people and that kind of thing. And because we were so busy with our businesses, and at one point in time, I was in 20 chambers of commerce, believe it or not.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
That's a lot of
been in
networking.
the
That's a lot of chambers.
The McKinney Chamber for at least 25, 30 years. But because we were in so many different cities around the state, a lot of chambers, so a lot of PR type work. I handled the marketing for the companies. So, just over the years, just worked really hard and the demands of, kids and grandchildren and family. Then the last 10 years, my mom, I couldn't really do much politically or anything because I was taking care of my mom, who has Alzheimer's. So I won't get into that. Too emotional. But a tough road when you're taking care of family.
Yeah.
So did that.
Yeah.
And then Mom had to go into a home 3 years ago. At that point, that's when I was free to run for office.
Wow.
So.
Alzheimer's is such an unfair disease.
Sure.
It's just an awful disease.
So what was your impetus for going from behind the scenes to being front runner?
As I said, I've always been politically involved. My first degree was in political science. Just the issues. I mean, really, I felt like the U.S. And Texas were at a critical time where we needed more conservative leadership. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of, we just came out of COVID. There was a lot of, I think, wasteful spending going on. We had border issues, property tax issues, security issues, election integrity issues, just a lot of things that needed attention. And actually, it was my husband who said, you might as well run for office because you want to do, I was so passionate about it. He said, you might as well just run for office. Mm-hmm. And we thought at that point in our life, finally retirement age, that we would run and play a little bit, But I think we might have had 2 months after we put Mom into a nursing home before we decided to run for office. So we had very little free time. But just jumped in and decided to get involved. And because we've always been so concerned mm-hmm. about so many issues, mm-hmm. We just had the freedom finally at that stage of our life. We turned all the businesses over to the leadership team. They could run the businesses, and we could give back to the public. Mm-hmm. So it just seemed like, timing-wise, mm-hmm. I never thought at 67 years old I'd be called a freshman. That was that was an eye-opener when you get to Austin and you're the new kid on the block mm-hmm. at 67. So just the timing was right. We finally had the freedom between the businesses and the kids and the grandkids and the family.
So before we dig into specific issues, I'd love to hear from you on what you feel your philosophy is on the role of government in a larger sense. When we think about the interplay between the 4 levels of government, obviously federal at the top of the food pyramid, and then state, and then county, and then city. What do you feel like as a representative of the constituents of a certain region of Texas? What is the role of a state government? What should be the role of a state government in your own philosophy as it pertains to just life in general for the citizens of House District 61? For state government, because obviously you're in a state level position. You're a representative of the people in Austin, talking about state level laws. What is the ideal role for state government in your opinion?
Well, I believe in limited government to begin with. And you'd be surprised how many people contact me about federal issues and want me to do something about it. I have to say, well, I really don't have any control over that. But I think the state needs to set, obviously set the boundaries, set the ground rules, and then let the individual cities, counties do as much as possible. Government's always best when government's closest to the people.
Okay.
And we have 254 counties in Texas. And rural versus urban, it's just such a diverse state. It makes it tough to make laws for everyone, right? And of course, District 61 is my primary concern.
Sure.
But you have to realize we are running the world's 7th largest economy. So basically the 7th largest country in the world, 140 days every other year. And it is a huge, huge undertaking. And it's a lot of work in a short period of time. And so it's a difficult job to run the state the size of Texas in that short window of opportunity. Mm-hmm. But I always believe local control is the best. But unfortunately, in some situations, we have city governments and even some county governments that get out of bounds and force the state to make rules for everyone that people aren't happy about. But it's just it's just it's tough to seek balance.
Yeah.
I think when you get down there, you realize that it's really, really hard to find balance because of the diversity and the enormous size of our state.
When we, and sorry, you go ahead. Keep it down this rail for a little bit.
Yeah, no, go.
Forgive me, the numbers on these bills for two of them escape me. I forget exactly what it was. Senate Bill 6, of course, I remember because of all of the limitations it places on extraterritorial jurisdiction, aka the ETJs, limiting the city's ability to annex without a lot more cooperation from the individuals. That one I remember the number of. The other two that I want to get your take on because it directly relates to the interplay between local government, as in city mostly. And I have to confess, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with state government. I've never been an elected official. I have considerable experience at the city level and know all 7 of our city council people on at least some personal level. So that's the nature of the question here. The first issue was ETJ and annexation restrictions placed on local city government. The second was the the second one. I'll think of it in a second. I'm sorry. The third one I'm thinking of is more recent, where the control over the building codes and standards where multifamily and apartment developers are able to convert commercial property in the city can't stop them from doing that. I'll think of the second one in a second.
Well, first of all, there were 9,000 bills written this session. So if you can't think of a number, that's why.
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot of numbers. 2,000
of them passed, and about 500 were actually signed by the governor.
Yeah.
So I don't always remember the numbers either. There were about 4 bills along those lines that were designed.
I thought of the second one. The building like the building facade, the materials and consistencies and whatnot, where the city couldn't regulate the physical appearance of some of the building standards. That was the second one. Sorry.
Don't even remember the number on that.
Yeah.
But there were about 4 to 6 bills that were designed to increase, to reduce the cost of housing for young families. Because particularly in McKinney and Frisco, young families are being driven further north because they can't afford housing.
Yeah. Right.
So what they were trying to do, one of those bills reduced the lot size. If you had 5-acre tract of land or more, you could have a smaller lot size. One of them was about building materials, making it less expensive to build homes so that young families could get into homes. The one about commercial buildings, that one was a really interesting one. That one started out as a bill for inner cities of 1 million in population or more to be able to go in and retrofit commercial buildings and turn them into condos, because we had inner cities dying, Houston, San Antonio, Austin. And so that bill I voted for because it made sense. I mean, I live in a condo in Austin, in downtown, where they had converted an office building to a condo. And so some of these empty office buildings, it made sense rather than having the blight of empty buildings in downtowns.
Yeah.
But then they went in and they changed that bill and they amended it to populations of 150,000 to 300,000, which then meant it affected McKinney and Frisco.
If I may ask a clarifying question, when you say they, who are you referring to? What's the they?
The authors of the bill.
The authors, okay.
The authors of the bill, the people who are pushing that bill. Okay. So then all of a sudden it became more of a local issue, and I voted against that because we don't have high-rise buildings in downtown McKinney, and we don't want condos in downtown McKinney.
No.
So, again, that's an issue that's better with local control. But often what happens is that you'll get lobbyists and third-party interests that go in and start squeezing people who wrote the bills, and the bills morph and change, and a bill is heard 3 times in Austin, right?
Yep.
And so the bill that you heard in committee isn't the same bill that you hear in the second reading on the floor and then the third reading on the floor. And so sometimes you change your vote, you change your mind.
Yep.
So, but that particular bill, I think we're going to have to go back and readdress that one next session and try and tweak it because it passed. Yeah. And now it's affecting smaller communities where that wasn't the intent of that bill. But the building standards the whole intent of the other one you were talking about was to try and make houses more affordable. And I know now President Trump's trying to do some of that and make housing more affordable, but we have a big problem in Collin County that young families cannot get houses. And so in some areas in Collin County, we have restrictions of an acre lot. Mm-hmm. And, we could put 6 or 8 houses on that acre. So we're trying to find balance where young families can still live here and not get priced out of the market. So I think those are the ones that you're referring to.
So to summarize, I want to make sure I hear you correctly. If forced into a simple binary question of if you can only pick one, home affordability versus local control in its greatest sense, you would pick home affordability over local control. If you were only, I know that's a hard question, but if you had to choose one and you had to give up the other one in favor of the one you chose, home affordability versus local governance, how would you? I
don't think you can choose that. I think it has to be a balance. I think you have to have some areas where you have maybe a higher density with smaller homes for young families, and then but you still want local input and local control. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's either or. I think it's trying to find balance.
Okay.
And that's a hard thing to do.
How do you do that at the state level? For you, because you represent a small fraction of the state, population, but yet the state is only able to make a unilateral decision that affects everybody.
That's the problem, James. That's the problem.
I get, and that's the meat and potatoes of this conversation is how do we make sense of that? Because what's good for McKinney may be terrible for Houston or vice versa.
And that's a situation with the condos in downtown in those big cities.
Yeah.
So you try to craft legislation that is more specific in nature and not so broad. So with that one bill should have been 2 bills. It should have been a bill for the cities $1 million and above, and it should have been a bill for $150,000 to $300,000. It shouldn't have been 2 bills combined together, forcing a bad vote.
Yeah.
So what?
That kind of pits different blocks of lawmakers against each other.
Exactly.
The rural and the smaller and medium-sized city folks are going to be warring with Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston.
And the problem is that the lobbies for these big cities, for Dallas and Houston,
are
a lot stronger, and they've got a lot more money to come down there and lobby. So, so therein lies the rub, right? Shakespeare would say. So that's the problem, trying to create laws. But if you can make them specific enough to individual situations, it's when we get these really broad bills that affect everyone. And then what I have found is that you have to go back. You tend to go back over the next several sessions and tweak the bill to get it right. Yeah. So they'll pass a bad bill, and then we have to go back and
revise it.
And revise it. And
so is that what you intend to be involved in next session if you're elected?
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping we can go back and tweak that.
And basically break the 2 parts off of each other and have a small city section and a large city section?
Those are the kind of things that you work on. But your level of influence is very limited primarily to the committees that you're assigned to.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily get to choose those committees.
Yeah.
So like I'm not on any of those committees. I'm on Trade, Workforce, and Economic Development, which is a good fit for me because I've been an employer for 40-something years. That one is a good fit. I'm on Human Services, which is the second largest expense in the state of Texas. It's child support. It's Medicare, Medicaid, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Mental health, those kind of things. So that's a big learning curve. The book they handed me was about 2 inches thick on Medicaid that I had to read. So that one's quite a learning curve, but it's a big expense for Texas. And then I'm also on international relations because Texas does so much business with other countries around the world. Mm-hmm. And that one's a pretty good fit because I have traveled and I know business. Yeah. So, but if you're not on one of those direct committees, you can author the bills, but you don't always get a lot of input into it.
And you don't get to see it until it comes to the floor for a reading.
And sometimes you're taking a vote about every 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So you're predetermined list of how you're going to vote, you pretty much have to already know that because it's happening fast and furious.
Just a procedural question for folks that may not be familiar. How important is the role of your staff, your legislative aides, your legislative director because to a large extent, you're a figurehead in some portions of the process, because there's no possible way for any human being to consume an adequate amount of information to make an informed decision on every single thing they have to vote on. So you're leaning, every representative is leading heavily on their staff to research, to form opinions based on what you have trained them. This is my approach. This is how I want you to be thinking. When you advise me, I want you to do this, this, and this. How important is your staff?
Your staff's very important, but also your memberships in various caucuses. So I was probably in 5 or 6 different caucuses, and those caucuses do research on the bills, and they have lawyers that they employ that also do research, like the Texas Conservative Coalition. And every Sunday afternoon at 6 o'clock, or maybe it was 5 o'clock, we were back in Austin going over the bills that were coming up the following week and getting a debrief on those bills. There's a Republican caucus. They do the same thing. So there were several different caucuses that all do research, and they give you recommendations for those bills. Your staff also has reading groups. Maybe this particular group of staff is reading all the health care bills, and this one is reading the insurance bills. And so we have different reading groups among our staffs that are also coming together and researching the bills and reading them. And then we get a very long list. We get a list from each of these organizations to input all that. And, this group recommends you vote yes, and this group recommends you vote no. And we take all those recommendations from these various experts, because you can't be an expert on everything.
No, it's not.
And you try and consolidate that information to make a good choice. And so there's a lot of input. And then, of course, there's over 2,000 lobbyists in Texas that are knocking on your door and trying to influence your vote as well.
I'm not going to say a word.
So,
yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
Whole different, so when you get down there, you realize there's a lot of nuance to it. There's an art and a science to it. But it's my job to filter all of that input and try and make a decision for my district.
I'm not poo-pooing lobbyists categorically. There are I am a grassroots lobbyist. I'm an organic citizen lobbyist. I'm not a professional full-time lobbyist. Those people are the definition of bought and paid for. I think having citizens, because they all represent some trade group somewhere with some special interest. That's why they have a job. Somebody paid them to go to Austin and wine and dine someone for their vote. The grassroots conversations, obviously, that's a critical part of government. I have been talking a lot. I'm going to give you an avenue here.
That was a great question. But while we're on this, recently, our public school funding, because we have a lot of teachers and, a lot of people, approach us because like, hey, you're on the podcast, ask these questions. Recently, there have been some pretty drastic cuts to the education budget. And at the same time, you support vouchers, correct? Do I remember that correctly? I don't want to misspeak here.
So we don't have vouchers in Texas. We have educational savings accounts. They're two different things. So there really haven't been a lot of cuts. We just passed the largest, SB 2 was the largest funding of public school in the state of Texas, $8.3 billion more for public education. So I supported the educational savings accounts, which was HB 2, and I supported the funding of public schools, which was SB 2. So we gave the largest pay raise to teachers ever in the state of Texas. We gave them increased retirement benefits. We increased their ability to remove difficult students from their classrooms because they weren't able to discipline. We increased the budgets for safety officers in school. There were 5 major bills. What was the last one? But anyway, so it was a huge overhaul, which was great because we desperately needed that. So we will always have public school. We will always support and pay for our public schools. So there's a lot of misconception around the school choice initiative. We were the 32nd state, maybe 33rd in the country that passed that. So Texas was late to the party. I read several books on the issue, and the empirical evidence and the research of the states that have passed that before. And in every state where they passed school choice, the scores went up across the board. Homeschool, public school, private school, charter school. All the kids' scores went up when they instituted school choice. So Florida, that used to be at the bottom of the barrel, is now number one in the country because they've had school choice for 25 years. So what Texas did was we flew in representatives from these states that had already passed it, and we said, what would you have done differently when you wrote your bill? Mm-hmm. And so we brought in those people, and we crafted our bill in a way that I think we had a really good bill. Now, 80% of that money goes directly to special needs and underprivileged children. And most people don't realize that. They think we're writing a check to private schools for middle-class kids, and that's not the case. We've got a really big state, and we have kids stuck in really bad learning environments and in dangerous situations with no way out. And so I think it's always best when the parents make the choice. Nobody knows a child better than the parents. And the parents need to put that child in an environment where they can thrive. And I don't care whether it's homeschool, public school, charter school, private school. What is best for that child? Let's get the focus back on the child. And when you do that and you empower the parents to make those decisions, you'll see those kids thrive. And so it's also a civil rights issue. And people don't really see it as that, but it's a modern civil rights issue. One of the best analogies that I read as I was researching the topic, I'll just use McKinney because we're sitting in McKinney. It said, if I said to you, we've got great parks on the west side of McKinney, and you've got crappy parks on the east side of McKinney, and I'm saying to you, you can't come play in my park on the west side. That's what we were doing to school students. We were saying, we got good schools over here, but you're stuck here, and you can't go to a good school. And that's wrong. That is wrong. And so by allowing school choice, we are empowering the parents to put their child in an environment where that child can succeed. And what you will see over the next few years is you will see micro schools pop up, cluster schools pop up, and other types of alternative education where these kids can thrive. And there are three different types of learners: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learners. And if you're a kinesthetic learner, you have to be moving and doing things with your hands, and you can't sit still in a classroom and really absorb and learn. And so oftentimes when we took shop and cosmetology and all these things out of school, y'all are too young to remember this.
No,
but,
I had that in my school.
So, but we lost a third of our talent because those kids who are hands-on learners could no longer be successful in the public school system. They dropped out of school, they got on drugs, they got on alcohol, they became dropouts, some went to jail, some went to prison, and we are still paying for those kids today because we failed as a society to educate them the way God wired them. So now those kind of kids can flourish. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of trades education, because a third of our students don't have to go to college. They can get a trade and they can make six figures coming out of school. And they can, be very successful in life. So all of this fits together and ties together. But when it comes down to it, it's what's best for that individual child. So I think you're going to see huge improvement in all types of learning. But you might have a special ed teacher that decides she wants to teach 5 kids in her home. And she can do that now. She can apply to the state of Texas and get funds from the ESAs and just, work with 5 kids. So you're going to see a lot of different types of education, but I think it's for the best of the students.
Interesting. So what do you say? Because I've heard people say that when you take children from, let's just generically say an underperforming school, rather than taking students from there, which will affect their overall budget, what do you say to the people who say, well, why don't we pour more resources into this school? So if it's a C-level performing school, why don't we just pour more resources in there so that they become an A-level school?
Because we've been doing that for years. And we've poured more and more money in, and the scores have gone down and down and down. So if we keep, we're not getting better results for more money. It's not the money. And that's the problem. I mean, currently the state is spending almost $17,000 per child in public school. Mm-hmm. And I think the numbers in McKinney now are about $18,500 that they're spending. Mm-hmm. So
that's annually
per child.
Per child.
Per child. That's what the state is giving them.
$18,000.
$18,000.
That's a car.
So the average private school tuition in the state of Texas is under $12,000. Mm-hmm. So it's not a hockaday, but I'm saying the average. Mm-hmm. So the money isn't the answer. If money was the answer, we've already fixed the problem. Mm-hmm. So I think parental involvement, is always the answer for a successful child.
We're going to camp out here for a little bit because this is a huge issue. A lot of all the questions and comments, this was by far the most talked about issue in the post that we made. I've got 3 clarifying questions I'd love to get your take on. You mentioned at the top that it's not a voucher, it's an education savings account. I've got 2 more follow-up questions after that, but answer that one first. Like, what's the difference between a voucher and an education savings account for those of us that are not familiar?
So in some states, they have a voucher and they mail you a check. If you're in the program, they mail you a check and the parents spend the money. Mm-hmm. In the state of Texas, with the savings account, the comptroller controls the money. And your child has an account. The money's held in the state of Texas, but as the parent, you determine where the money's going to go. If you want to spend the money on a particular homeschool curriculum, you tell the state, send the money here. If you want to go to a private school or a charter school, you tell the state, send the money here. Okay. The state controls the funds. That way, you're not concerned about someone stealing from the state.
Are they just taking the check?
Or they're just taking the check, or is it even going to education at that point? So we control the funds.
So you made a comment about 80% that I wasn't aware of in the reading.
Most people aren't.
80% of the funds are in the writing of the bill that was signed by Governor Abbott, earmarked for special needs and disadvantaged students that come from, I'm guessing, like Title I and similar schools where they have some sort of lower test scores. We're trying to bring up some of the most vulnerable kids in our state. What happens with the remaining 20%? And help me understand, just for me as a typical, upper middle class suburban resident of McKinney. Let's say if my wife and I hypothetically want to take our kids out of McKinney ISD and move them to a McKinney Christian Academy or Trinity Christian or Prestonwood or any of the other, not public schools in the area. We can't do that because we don't qualify for that based on economic need, or we're not special needs, we're not disadvantaged. We don't really fit any of those criteria.
Anyone can apply. So you apply and you get in line. But the first 80% is going to underprivileged and special need kids. Special ed kids get $30,000 a year because that education is so expensive. Mm-hmm. And so it's $2,000 if you're homeschooled. It's $30,000 if you're special needs, and I think it's $10,000, around $10,000 somewhere for let's say private school.
Gotcha.
So you can go online right now and apply, and get in line. And there is a process that they go through, but that first 80%, and most states who go the school choice method have always started with the underprivileged kids.
Sure,
it's always started there. So the first 80% goes to that. The last 20%, I don't know if they're using a lottery system or...
Yeah, that was really my next question.
Yeah, and
does the bill specify the selection criteria for the folks that don't meet special needs or disadvantage in some way that you just described?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I think it's a combination of a lottery type system or something like that, and getting in line first. Yeah. So... you might not get it this year, but you might be in line to get funds next year.
Understood.
So it's a waiting list kind of thing.
Okay.
So you said there was a follow-up.
Well, the two remaining, the optics specific to McKinney with the closure of those 3 schools for a number of reasons. Budget was definitely the biggest one, but underutilization. There's a lot of stuff in that 3 school closing thing. We do not have time to get into that. I know that's a local issue much more than the district. School funding seems to be an across-the-board problem for public education in the whole country. It's not just a Texas thing. You mentioned having a huge increase in school funding that was just passed this past cycle. You said $8-something billion?
$8.3 billion.
Okay.
$8.3 billion.
And that was allocated towards increased teacher salaries and a bunch of other stuff?
There were about 5 bills in
Okay.
the education system. So what we've found over the last few years is that we would give a school district, the state, when I say we, would give a school district a lump sum of money.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't necessarily, it wasn't getting to the classroom. So this time, we broke it up into specific bills that forced the money to go to specific areas.
Okay.
So again, it's one of those situations where I would like to, we'd like to just give it to local control, but local school boards were not spending the money wisely. And I'm not saying McKinney wasn't. I'm saying
Sure.
across the state.
Yeah.
So the teachers weren't getting pay raises, but there were a lot more superintendents and assistant superintendents at administrative load. The money was going more to administration than getting to the classroom. So that's why they broke it up into separate bills to force money to go to the teachers, into the classroom, into security. So that's why it was broken up into separate bills.
Sure.
Now, when you come to the McKinney, the closing of the 3 schools, of course, very emotional issue in McKinney.
Yeah.
And I was seeing all kinds of stuff online about that. And so I reached out to some of those people and I said, look, I'll hold a town hall and I'll show you exactly what the state is spending and where the money's going. And so I held a town hall. I had about 35 mama bears show up and I showed them, this is public data from the TEA, right? And I showed them, here's all the money and here's where it's going. This is what the state is spending. And I think their eyes were opened. I think they were shocked about how much the state was funding the schools. But I honestly believe McKinney was doing the right thing by closing the schools. You can't have a campus with 800 kids and only have 450 there. I mean, there's a life cycle to a school district. I mean, to a school district, and to a neighborhood. The kids start out in elementary, they move to junior high, they go to high school, then they go off to college. And unless young families with kids move in there, that elementary school is no longer.
It doesn't get refilled.
That's right.
And so you have to redistrict to get more kids to sustain that school. So part of this is just a natural life cycle of McKinney growing to the north, but not growing
in the south
in
and west.
In the south.
Yeah.
And so as much as painful as it is, it's still a business.
Yeah.
And we can't afford.
Yeah.
I think they made the right decision. It's not an easy decision. Do I like it? No. But it's a natural life cycle for a neighborhood. And some cities are beginning to open up and not have individual boundaries. Like Frisco, an elementary school, doesn't have boundaries. You can go to any elementary you want. And so, again, that allows competition. Now, you might have to drive your kids across town, but I believe McKinney and other cities are looking at doing some of those same things to average out the number of kids at the schools so we don't have these problems. But these are not easy issues, and they're not issues that you can debate on social media because they're too broad. You can't, it's just too broad. You have to sit down and look at the data. And so that's what I tried to do when I did the town hall.
The last piece, and I have to say, you've answered a good amount of this last question with the previous context that you provided. And I thank you for very specific fact-based answers because it makes it so much harder for people to argue the things they argue on social media and whatnot. The third question, same topic, and I know that you're not Governor Abbott, and this was not you directly. The optics of the whole school choice thing from Governor Abbott becoming just an aggressive champion of the issue in the same period of years that he receives 2 different campaign contributions that total $10 million from a billionaire who made his fortune in the private school industry. How do you guys, as the lawmakers, help make sense of these decisions that are voted on by a whole assembly, but they're championed by the governor, who, I mean, the optics of it could not be worse. It looks like just good old-fashioned crony, bought and paid for capitalism where our governor did what the billionaire told him to do, and so he pushed school choice because it's just what the billionaires wanted. That's what a lot of people think when you look at campaign donations totaling $10 million.
I don't know where the governor gets his money. That's not.
How do you, as a lawmaker, make sense of that in respect to your constituents? Because I know you're not Greg Abbott. I'm not holding you responsible for what he did or said. 0%. Now, the alignment, the reality of politics, you take a picture with him, Angela Paxton, who I have a very high esteem for. I think she's wonderful and what she's done. There's so many people that draw all these conclusions about, oh, well, she took a picture with him. She invited him to her city, her home, or whatever it was. I don't know the exact details. Governor Abbott did what he did. You are responsible for defending a vote, a bill, the implications to your constituents. How do you make sense of the two and just all the emotion tied up in this? It's such a volatile bill.
It was the right thing to do. If you do the research and you read the books and you look at what happened in the other 2 states that have already passed this, it was the right thing for the kids in Texas. So whether the money had anything to do with it, I don't know. But I know it was the right decision. I'm 100% convinced it was the right thing to do for the children in Texas. And so that's why I voted that way, because I did read the books, I did do the research, I talked to the other states, and I saw how their scores were going up and the success they were having. And we were not succeeding in Texas, and something had to change. You can't keep doing the same thing. That's the definition of insanity, if you keep doing the same thing and getting poor results. And so I felt like we had to do the right thing for the kids. And I believe that's what the governor knew, because he saw all these other states doing this, and it was working. And so I really don't believe it was a billionaire pulling the strings. When you do the research, and I've got the books, if you want to read the books, I'll show you the titles and you can read the research. But when you look at the empirical research and how well these kids are doing, you just have to come to the conclusion it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So I don't really track where the governor gets his money, but I am 100% convinced that was the right thing for the children of Texas.
I can't argue with your opinion. That's right. People hired you to do the job because they think that your way of looking at it is the best fit for what they want, and that's why the voters are in charge of this whole thing. I can't argue with anything you just said.
And let's,
Fred, I'm going to give you the mic, man.
On that, talking about the voters thing, you challenged the incumbent and you won, and now, Frederick Frazier is now challenging the incumbent, and so this is your opportunity. People voted for you, and I didn't go out and survey, are you happy with the results of your vote or those things? But for people who did not vote for you or people who are on the fence, what do you want to say to those people as to why they should vote for Keresa?
Well, now I have a voting record, and I have I'm very proud of my voting record. I have a very fiscally conservative voting record, and there are numerous scorecards and organizations, the Rice Index, let me think, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. There are a lot of organizations that score the performance of legislators. Mm-hmm. And I would say compare and contrast my voting record with his. Mm-hmm. The Rice Index, which is not a conservative index, in the 88th legislative session, he was 17th from the bottom as far as conservative legislators. And in the 89th, when I was there, I was 25th from the top. So out of 150 representatives, I was one of the more conservatives. He was one of the more liberal, or least conservative is the right way to say it. If you look at Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, his score was 30-something, mine was 92. So you have to go back and you have to compare those scorecards that analyze the votes on all these bills, mm-hmm. and decide if those votes line up with your belief system, and what you think is right. So I don't know Mr. Frazier personally. I have no ill will towards him at all. I've never said anything negative about him, even though many people did in the last election. It wasn't coming from me. But when I compare my voting record to his, I believe that I best portray the will of the people, mm-hmm. I guess. But that's up for them to decide. I can't, but I would just say, look at the scorecards, look at the records, and compare and contrast those.
To your point there, we very intentionally did not release Mr. Frazier's episode before we recorded with you, out of fairness to both candidates. We wanted to record both and then release both, so neither one of you had any advantage over the other. Given what you just said, because you remember this conversation, it directly relates to something we talked about in Mr. Frazier's episode. He brought up exactly the same scorecard, the 92% from Texans for fiscal responsibility. And he stated explicitly, and this is almost a direct quote, the only way you get a number that high is to vote no on everything and just vote to not spend money. That's the only way that you get, from this particular group, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, the only way you get a super high score is to vote no to everything. Or almost everything. That was the assertion. With apologies to Mr. Frazier, because I just quoted him and giving you the opportunity to respond. I would love to give him the same opportunity after your episode drops. Frederick, if you want to have another follow-up, you are more than welcome to. How do you respond to that assertion that the only way to get a 92% score from Texans for Fiscal Responsibility is to say no to as many things as possible?
Well, I didn't vote no on everything. I did vote no on a lot, because I believe our budget is very, very bloated. For example, and I told you my mom has Alzheimer's, my grandmother has Alzheimer's. They wanted to spend $1 billion on Alzheimer's research. That is not a core function of government.
I don't want government doing that.
So I voted no to that $1 billion, even though my family is directly impacted by that.
Yeah.
But that's not. We shouldn't be spending.
Well, that's conservatism, Keresa.
But that shouldn't. So I voted no on that, right?
Yeah.
But that's not a core function of government. So you have to look at where the taxpayers' money is going. Is this a wise use of our money? And I voted no against the budget because there was a lot of pork in that budget, and so I think I was one of only 7 people that voted no on the budget. But I couldn't, in good conscience, spend people's money on stuff like Alzheimer's research and things that I didn't feel like my constituents would want me to spend their money on. So I said no to a lot, but I was number 25. So there were 25 people ahead of me that said no to everything. I didn't say no to everything. But again, you have to look at what is the function of government. What are they supposed to spend money on? What are they not supposed to spend money on? And you make the determination from there. And I just felt like that was, like I voted yes on SB 75, Bob Hall's bill, for the grid. We got a problem with our grid, and it was a very expensive bill. I voted yes because we have a failing grid, and we have to take care of our electrical grid, right? So I voted yes on that. I voted yes on the $1 billion for water, because we got a water problem in Texas. Mm-hmm. And we've got water in some places, but not water in other places. If we don't start building that infrastructure now, our kids 20 years from now aren't going to have water to drink. So I voted yes on that. So I voted yes on the things that I thought were important for Texans, but no on the stuff that was frivolous and not our job. I think the federal government should be doing Alzheimer's research, not the state of Texas. So those are some examples.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That makes sense. Fred, before we ask her the final question about not that final question, we're going to skip that. we have a who would win between a polar bear and a shark thing that we're going to save you from.
Okay, good, because I don't know that one.
No. It's kind of our stock final question, but we try to keep things a little bit more, to the point with someone who's as important as you are to the conversation. Anything you want to ask before I hit her with the public perception? What do you say about that?
No, I think that first off, to come in here knowing that we're going to be asking questions from the masses. I thank you so much for giving us up your time and that. And I think that in terms of, you haven't shied away from any of the questions. And you've had, solid answers. So, I think we just go ahead and go for it, because I can't think of anything specifically. There were questions on several of the social media posts that just I don't think
they didn't really get enough traction with likes and replies and whatnot. Yeah. They just don't need to be asked in this forum. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll end with this, because I make this statement as we were preparing before this conversation. You've given some wonderful answers, I think, and been very insightful for our audience to get some real understanding of how you're approaching things. Going into this conversation, it was hard for me to be super enthusiastic about any candidate in the race because, and let me just speak in a general sense. When I see all the stuff in conversation on social media and blogs and websites and whatnot, the general narrative of people that oppose you is that you're an uppity, elitist crony who isn't doing the will of the people. And that Mr. Frazier, the people that don't like him, they say he is an angry, volatile person with, poor judgment in crisis situations. Obviously, your opposition thinks what they think. Mr. Frazier's opposition thinks what they think. How do you respond to basically the prevailing narrative that Keresa is in league with Trump and Cruz and Abbott and all these big wigs, and she's in her big britches and not doing the will of the people that voted for her? What's your response to that? And I'll let you have the last word, and then we will invite you to a debate.
So there's nothing uppity about me. My husband and I are just very down-to-earth people. There's nothing uppity about us. But as far as not doing the will of the people, wow. I mean, I hold coffees, I hold forums, I have an open door policy. I'm constantly talking to people. I ask questions. I do town halls when there's a, school choice or whatever. So I think I have my ear to the ground. We've lived here and our business is here, I don't know, 30, 35, 40 years. I don't know, long time. So I feel like I know what the people want. When it comes to endorsements, I believe that typically the incumbent gets the endorsements. When Mr. Frazier was in office, he had the endorsements of the governor and all those people, and that was fine then. But when I have them, all of a sudden it's not fine. So I believe incumbents typically get the endorsements of the party, the governor who's in the Republican Party, the president. So I don't think that's anything unusual. I have the endorsements of local people as well, the sheriff and the county judge and many local people as well. So I don't believe that's a valid argument because I've probably lived here and been, as involved in this community as Mr. Frazier, if not longer. So I don't know where people get those preconceived notions, but I have an open door policy. I meet with people all the time. I've got a town hall coming up on the 30th, another meet and greet, and I'll meet with anybody anytime. So happy to do that.
Along those lines of meeting with anyone at any time, we're a little bit forward. I don't know if you have any reason to know this or not. Fred and I got to be moderator of two different debates last year, one for the mayor election in McKinney and the other for the city council races last year. And that was just a great bit of fun. Yes. Some very interesting conversations there.
I was probably in Austin. I didn't know that.
No, you were busy doing the work of being a lawmaker.
That's right.
It was a very interesting election.
But we have a forum tonight.
Yes, I do. And I intend to be there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I heard about that a couple of weeks ago and was like, well, shoot, I better be there. I need to get better informed. So on the spot, we don't have specific dates or times yet. We challenged Mr. Frazier if he'd be willing to attend a debate with all of the registered candidates for the race. And we'll ask you the same question. Working out the details with your team and scheduling and whatnot, are you willing to do that? We'll work with coordination with whoever we need to with the various political parties in Collin County, and are you down to have a debate with Mr. Frazier and the other two candidates?
We have the Democrat candidates, the ones in the fall you're talking about.
Are they? I'm sorry, I was responding to Brian Reagan mentioned that. There's only two for the primary.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are two Democratic.
That's why I wasn't familiar with the names that he said. It was like
he listed them, and I was like,
I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, there's only two of you. There's only two in the primary.
Then I apologize. That's my mistake. I confused what Brian was saying.
But no, I have no problem with that. I don't know how many forums we need to have. We've got one tonight. When we ran previously, we only had one forum.
Understood.
So
then maybe there's no need to do it. If you guys are on the same stage tonight.
Tonight.
Are you just answering prepared questions, or are you able to actually debate with each other on issues?
It's a combination. We submitted questions for each other, and they submitted questions that we'll be discussing. I think there were 8 topics that we were discussing, some of which we've already talked about today.
Yeah.
But if I can do it, I will be there.
Sure.
I have to be back in Austin the next 2 weeks. I have to be in Washington. I just flew in from the border today.
You did.
My schedule is pretty insane.
I'll tell you what, I will be in attendance tonight, and if I feel like things are left unsaid or if we need to have more conversation at that time, I'll get with Fred and we'll invite both of you guys.
I mean, we are very, very busy.
Yes, you are.
Doing the work of the people. But I'm happy to, I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk about any issue anytime.
Well, just like we did for, sorry, go ahead, Fred.
No, I said love it.
Just like we did for Mr. Frazier, I want to thank you for your time. I know how busy your schedule is.
Sure. Thank
you for being so gracious with your time and candid with your answers. I think this was a great conversation. And whether someone came into this interview and episode being favorable towards you or not favorable towards you, I think they are left with a lot of things to consider. So she is State Rep Keresa Richardson. She's running for re-election. It's March 6th, 3rd, what?
3rd.
It's the first Tuesday in March. It's Super Tuesday, as they say.
35 days to early voting or something.
Yeah.
It's coming up quick.
Yeah. So all the information on Keresa's campaign will be on the show notes of the episode or the description if you're watching on YouTube. And that's it for this episode. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time, everybody.
Thank you very much.